Welcome. This is the NSO Field Guide to Penalty Box Timer by me, Hannah Ballistic. Disclaimer, this presentation is not endorsed by any organization. To remain consistent with WFDA materials, some text and examples have been quoted directly from official WFDA documents. However, WFDA and any other organizations are not responsible for the content or accuracy of this presentation. All information is current as of today's date, and any opinions expressed are solely my own. This session is being recorded. So here are our NSO positions, and we're going to focus on the penalty box and specifically these penalty box timers. We're not going to go over penalty box manager right now. We'll do that at a later date in a future clinic. So our penalty box, here's a picture of our penalty box. It includes seating for 6 penalized skaters, a jammer, and 2 blockers from each team. The penalty box also includes the floor space on the front and sides. The boundary is marked out with tape. And only penalized skaters and officials may enter the box. So as a penalty timer, what are your duties? So there's going to be 2 penalty box timers, 1 for each team. And you're going to use a stopwatch and provided paperwork to track skaters' time in the penalty box. You're going to time the penalties for one team's blockers and the pivot, but you're going to be tracking all the paperwork for your assigned team skaters. So that means you're timing for the blockers and pivot, but you're also going to be filling out the paperwork for the jammers, your team's jammer, which are only going to be timed by the penalty box manager. And your partner is the penalty lineup trackers. So here's a view of what you will create. Usually in the penalty box, we do everything on paper, and it's used as a reference to figure out what happened and which skater served in which period, at which time in the game. So here's some penalties specific. Each penalty is served by the skater being in the penalty box for 30 seconds. This does not include gross penalties that require game expulsion. A skater may serve more than 1 penalty in a single trip to the penalty box, and that would add 30 seconds for each additional penalty. Once a skater are assessed 7 penalties, they foul out and must leave the game. The thing to note is that the stopwatch is only running during a jam. Once the jam ends, the stopwatch must be stopped. Skaters who break penalty box rules can be issued additional penalties by the penalty box manager, or if your head NSO allows, other officials can also issue penalties. And an example would be leaving the box early. So if they left before their time was served completely, they have to return to the box, and they're gonna get another penalty. Each team's corresponding box seats are positioned farthest from their bench. So if Team A is on the left, their box seats are going to be on the right if they're, the box in between both benches. So before the game starts, you're going to introduce yourself to the other officials working in the box. Ensure you have all of your tools. You're going to get your stopwatches. Some penalty box officials like to have 1 stopwatch. Others want to have 2. Make sure you have pencils, multiple pencils. Grab your paperwork, your clipboard, and determine which team you will be tracking. You're also going to verify the skater numbers have not been adjusted with your head NSO. So if any skaters did not show up, or if there's any subs or any discrepancies, the numbers were entered incorrectly, you're going to check with that. So during gameplay, what you're going to look for, from referees, you're going to look for multiple penalties. This is your sign for multiple penalties. From the penalty box to the PLTs in the infield, you're going to look for total number of penalties. So I tell my officials to notify at 5, 6, and 7. So my hand signals that I do is when a skater has 5 and they're sitting in the box, I do an open hand. 6 is a single finger. And 2 or 7 is the 2 fingers, and that signals that they have fouled out. From the jam timer, you're going to listen for the 5 seconds and the whistle for jam start. And when the jam is on, the your stopwatch must be started if there's a skater in the penalty box. From a ref or a jam timer, you're also going to listen for a jam ending. When the jam ends, you stop your stopwatch. Also, you're going to look for stoppages of play. If there's a team timeout, an official's timeout, or an official review, it's a good chance to meet up with your penalty lineup trackers and check that all the penalties are accurate. Here's a close-up of your paperwork. So when you get the paperwork, you're going to fill out the form header, including your name, team name, color and cue, date, and roster if it is not already filled out. Margins are for your notes. When weird stuff happens, write a note. There's a lot of detective work, just write a note. Here's a close-up of the form header. So let's go in each of the columns and I'll tell you what they do. So the first one is our period. We have our jam number. When a skater sits in between jams, you'll put a little X in the between jams. Team. So sometimes if we only have one penalty tracker or penalty box timer for one team, like if there's or for both teams, if they're in a scrimmage, you will have a team, you write like a little like shorthand of whatever team you're doing. Usually we just leave this blank if we have enough staff. Skater number, position, so that's what POS stands for. And just remember PB and J, pivot, blocker, jammer. So in, stand, and done are the time that the skater sat, stood, and finished their penalty. If the jam ends and they have not completed their service, this is where you're going to write the time on your stopwatch at the end of the jam. Over here, we have a tool that you use to track which jam you're in. Very helpful if there is no scoreboard, such as in a scrimmage, or if the scoreboard is not easily seen to so you can tell what jam it is. I tell people that I usually do at the start of the jam, I do a forward slash or a backslash, and then when the jam is completed, I can make an X, and so I go based off of the whistles. And as a penalty box manager, I also say, you know, we're going into jam 3, and I'll tell that to my penalty box timers so that everyone knows. In this last column is where you will total the penalties, and you'll do tally marks, so vertical lines for the number of penalties. So let's look at jam number. So you're going to write the current jam when the skater is seated in the penalty box. If the skater is in between jams, you're going to write the upcoming jam in this box. And then you would put an X in the between jams. So like I said, in the penalty trackers, they care about when the penalty was issued, but the penalty box timers care when the skater served the penalty. So that's how you have to think it. When the stopwatch is running for their penalty, that's what jam you have to write down. So under skater number, you're going to write the jersey of the penalized skater. We do have substitutions if they're made during it for an injury, a foul out, or an expulsion. The skater serving the penalty is also listed. I'll go into ways you can mark that in some scenarios. Substitutions may not occur during the jam. They must happen during an official timeout or after the jam end. They'll call an official timeout usually if there's a substitution due to like a foul out or an expulsion so that the team can put in a skater. Something to note is that the skater that's being subbed does not get issued that penalty. They're just kind of in place of that skater that had to be removed. So again, substitutions can only take place after the end of the jam where the penalty for the offending skater occurred, but before the next jam. You got to tell your penalty box manager if they're not already aware, and they will call an official timeout. This is the hand signal for an official timeout. If a penalty is assessed due to the captain, from the fact that they are the captain, they will serve the penalty as a blocker for the following jam. So if a penalty is issued to a team, the penalty will go to the captain. And if the captain was not in that jam, because obviously the penalty was issued to the team, they will the captain will serve as a blocker for that jam in the penalty box. Position, like I said before, PB and J, you're going to write the position of the skater serving the penalty. So if it's a pivot, you're going to write a P, blocker, B, and jammer, J. Timing, when you have to write the time on your stopwatch when the skater sits in the penalty box. Usually this is going to be 0. For stand, you're going to write the time 10 seconds before the end of the skater's penalty. So if it's 1 penalty, that's 30 seconds. There you would write 20. If it's 2 penalties, you would write 50 because they're supposed to serve 60 seconds. The skater should be told to stand 10 seconds before the penalty is fully served. If a skater stands early, their time stops until they are seated again. The verbal cue would be timing stopped, blue 112. If a skater does not stand in a manner that makes it clear to other officials, skaters, and spectators, like if they're just kind of squatting or whatever, that it's not clear that they're serving their final 10 seconds, the timing stops until they stand, and you will also give the verbal cue timing stopped, blue 112, stand. The time on the stopwatch when the skater should be told the penalty is done is what you write in the done. When a blocker has a single penalty, this will be 30 seconds after the time for in. So if skaters are issued multiple penalties at the same time for the same trip, each penalty will add 30 seconds to their time. And again, skaters with additional time will stand 10 seconds before released from the penalty box. I phrase it like this: it would be 30 seconds after you start, because people who use one stopwatch may have the penalty start after 0. So if one blocker came in, you start the stopwatch, it would be 0, and then another blocker came in, your stopwatch was at 12, that in number would be 12 unless you're starting on another stopwatch. Time at the end of jam. When skaters are still in the penalty box, when a jam ends, you're going to write down what the time is on the stopwatch when the jam ended. So if the jammer if a blocker has 12 seconds left on their penalty, the stopwatch would say 18. So you would write 18. Total number of penalties. The roster numbers of the team being tracked are listed on the right in the shaded blocks. And then when a skater comes to the penalty box to serve a penalty, you make a tally underneath that skater number for each penalty being served. Right here. And this is where you're going to put the tally. So total penalties. In case of a substitution, the tally should always be marked for the skater who was assigned the penalty, not the skater serving it. The exception is in the case of the captain serving for a team penalty. The penalty box officials should let skaters know their penalty totals, especially at the skater's 5th, 6th, and 7th penalties. And you're also going to use signals to the PLT and the head NSO, wherever they are on the inside track, to communicate skaters who have 5, 6, and 7 penalties. So fouling out, you're going to inform the skater that they have 7 penalties and have fouled out of the game and they cannot return to the track. Once the verbal cue to stand is given, or once the jam ends, whichever happens first, you're going to have the skater stand to the side of the box and wait to see if there's going to be an official review. Fouled out skaters report to the locker room and must gear down. They may return to the audience area after gearing down. Fouled out skaters may not stay on the team bench or act as a coach during the game. If a skater fouls out and the jam ends with time left on their penalty, the skater will be sent to gear down and the sub will take their place in the box and finish serving their penalty. If this happens, the sub will always take the position of the skater they are subbing. So if a pivot was fouled out, then the substitute will be a pivot. So the jam number tracking. Jam numbers are listed optionally to allow easier tracking of the current jam. The column to the left is for the first period and the column to the right is for the second period. This paperwork is one of the only paperworks that you can use both periods on the same paperwork if there's not that many penalties. So let's get into some scenarios and show how you would fill out that paperwork. So here we have in Jam 5, we have blue 5150 in the penalty box, and 22 seconds later, Jam 5 ends. Between jams, we have blue 666 sit in the penalty box. So this is an example of someone using one stopwatch. So Jam 5 started, this 5150, who is a pivot, entered the box. You filled out the 0 and the 20, but then the jam ended before the 30 happened. So you would fill out the 22 seconds at the time at the end of the jam. Let's say 666 had a late call or didn't reach the box until after the end of the jam. You mark between jams, and because they're starting their time in jam 6, you're going to write 6. And since it was at the end of the jam and you're using one stopwatch, you would write 22. And then you would do the mental math to like add 20 seconds and then 30 seconds. Then during jam 6, your blue 5150 completed their service, was released, and then 666 also finished their service. Another scenario, we're in jam 20 and red 513 is assessed a penalty, but due to an injury, a foul out, or an ejection, red 95 serves as a substitute. There's two ways you can mark this. You either write in the margin serving for 513, and you would write that 95 was sitting in the box, or you can write 513, the penalty that the skater that the penalty was issued to, /95. And this is how you would write it if the jam was called off. If the jam ended, you would write the time at the end of the jam and then make the sub. So another scenario 3, we have jam 4. We have blue 50 sits in the penalty box, but determined that they were not sent to the penalty box for a penalty. So this happens if there's like a self-report. You already filled out the paperwork. You might have started timing them, but then another official came over and said, blue 50, you don't have a penalty. Then they can be released from the box immediately and re-enter play. And then instead of spending time erasing, you would just cross it out. This paperwork, the rows are not crucial to adding up. Scenario 4, we have in jam 4, blue 125 sits in the penalty box, but leaves after 24 seconds without being dismissed. So they were told to stand, and either there was some confusion or something, and they left the box before their time was complete. So later in that jam 4, blue 125 will report back to the box and serve the remaining time for their first penalty with an additional penalty. So you would write in the margin left early at 24 seconds. And because they left the box at 24, you would write 24 in the done. And then they came back during the same jam. You already reset your stopwatch, and so you started at 0, but they had 6 seconds left. So they would stand at 26 seconds and finish serving with a total of 36 seconds. So there's some math involved. In jam 8, we have blue jammer 125 sits in the penalty box. 17 seconds later, we have red jammer 71 also sits in the penalty box. So this is what is handled. This is just an example of what the penalty box manager would do in case of a jammer swap. So both jammers cannot be in the penalty box at the same time, because then there's no derby going on. You don't have to worry about this other than how you would fill out the paperwork, which your penalty box manager will help with. So we have the penalty box timer for blue. Their jammer 125 sat in the box, and then before the 20 seconds was done, the red jammer came in and sat in the box. The blue jammer was released immediately, and because they only served 17 seconds total, the red jammer 71 will also serve 17 seconds. This gets a bit more complicated when there's multiple penalties or multiple trips involved, but this is what the penalty box manager focuses on because it can get quite confusing. So some box restrictions. Nobody may enter the penalty box except for officials and skaters who are serving penalties. So a coach may not enter the penalty box. They can talk to a skater within reason from outside of the penalty box. Skaters may also remove their mouth guard, but no other gear. They cannot take off their helmet. They cannot take off any pads or anything. They can retighten them if the Velcro, came loose or something, but they cannot take it off. And they can only remove their mouth guard while they are seated. Once they stand, they must put their mouth guard back in their mouth prior to leaving the box. Illegal procedure penalties may also be issued by the penalty box manager. So more restrictions. There must be no more than 2 blockers for the same team sitting in the penalty box at the same time. You can have 3 blockers in the box if one of them is standing for the last 20 seconds. So if there's not enough seats, the skater will have to return to the track and they will be in queue. And they'll return to the penalty box when there is space in the box, unless doing so would destroy the pack. And the referees on the track will help with this. Halftime responsibilities. So during halftime, you're going to check during the game and or at halftime whenever there's a stoppage of play with your penalty lineup tracker to verify the number of penalties for each skater. You'll transfer the number of penalties from the first sheet or to the second sheet if you're using both sheets. If space permits, you can just draw a dark line at the end of the period 1 penalties and continue on the same sheet. At the end of the first period, penalty box officials will note the team, number, position, and time remaining of any skaters still serving penalties before releasing them for the intermission. If teams are switching benches, the box sides must also switch. Usually you will keep the same team from period 1 to period 2 because, again, you are familiar with the numbers. So this is show you the penalty box manager will write on a whiteboard of any skaters that have time left at the end of the period so that during period 2, they can say like, okay, I'm missing my red 616 blocker. They have 18 seconds left. So, if your stopwatch accidentally got reset from the end of the period, you know that they have 18 seconds left. At the end of the game, your responsibility is to check with your PLT to verify the number of penalties for each skater on the team, same as with halftime. At the end of the game, do not release skaters from the box until the score is officially confirmed as final. The scoreboard will, when the second period ends, the scoreboard will say unofficial score. When it says official score is when you can release the skaters if any are left. You're going to turn in paperwork to designated locations specified by the head NSO or to the head NSO directly. So what does a typical penalty box trip look like for a penalty box timer? So a penalty is called on a skater. You're going to listen for that long whistle where the penalty has been called. And as the skater exits the track, you're going to notify the penalty box manager of the incoming skater. As they're skating over, you can see their team and their position. The penalty box manager will direct the skater to the correct seat. So when penalized skaters are in the box, you're going to start your stopwatch when the skater is seated in the chair. When butt hits chair, that is when you start your stopwatch. You'll fill out the paperwork in the meantime during the penalty. Sometimes you can also fill it out on their way to the box. If the box is busy, paperwork can be filled out after the skater is released. Sometimes you'll have to time multiple blockers at the same time. So 10 seconds before the penalty is complete, you're going to give the skater the verbal cue, either color or cue, number, stand. The word stand is said when the stopwatch reads 20 seconds. This will take some practice on how fast you can say it, but try to get that word stand when exactly 10 seconds before the penalty is complete. And again, it's going to say be 20 seconds if they're only serving one penalty. You're going to use corresponding hand signals for hard of hearing skaters. We do this all the time. Usually it's going to be just lifting up your hand while saying the verbal cue. So when the skater is done, you're going to give the skater the verbal cue, color, number, done. And the word done is said when the stopwatch reads 30 seconds if serving one penalty. And you'll use the corresponding hand signal, especially for hard of hearing skaters. So another thing that a lot of teams are using is a relay style, where usually we always do a no-touch box, so do not touch the skaters. In the case of a hard of hearing skater, we tell them that while they're sitting in the chair, you can put your hand over your shoulder, and the penalty box timer will tap to tell them to stand, and then they'll put their hand behind them while they're standing, and the penalty box timer can tap their hand to tell them to go. So that's relay style, and we do it that way because the touching is initiated by the skater. Otherwise, it's no touch. So for the stand, I usually do it over their shoulder so that they can see it in their peripheral vision. During lineups and timeouts, you're going to stop the penalty on your stopwatch at the end of the jam. In general, you may talk to the skaters. If they ask them how much time is remaining, you can tell them. That's not a problem. You probably won't know what penalty they are serving for, but if you do, you can share that information as well. If appropriate, and if there's time, you can help them out by handing them a water from someone on their bench. But otherwise, they just sit in the box. So this is the jam ending whistle. The jam is not over until the final whistle of the first set of 4 blasts. So this is when the jam officially ends. Here are my references from WFDA Officiating Resources, their online learning courses, Officially Mel's YouTube, Dublin Roller Derby's YouTube, and Queen of Catitude's NSO Position Guide. Do we have any questions?